and I shared it with an auctioneering company next door, and we became good friends. And this was one of the techniques that he would do to get his lips moving for the auction. This guy was just, hey, now, how are there now? Yeah, I can't do it justice, but he would go quick, and he taught me this one, and I found it here. It is, Betty bought some butter, but she said the butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter, but a bit of better butter will make my batter bitter. So she bought a bit of butter, better than her bitter butter, and she put it in her batter, and the batter was not bitter. So 'twas better Betty bought a bit of better butter. Oh, hey. You can cut some of that out.
Oh, we're definitely using that. It's a lot more sophisticated than toy boat.
Hey, you got to start somewhere, buddy. Don't be hard on yourself, man.
How are things?
Dude, it's been a marathon weekend day. I don't even know where to start, but I'm very excited about 2018. I'm just going to put that out there, man. I'm very excited.
You got some big time goals and resolutions you're going to start the year with?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if they're big time. I mean, they're I'm not going to be like, yeah, I'm running every fucking day, 10 miles and kind of a thing, but I definitely have some things that I'm excited about and some things that I'm going to blow up this year. And yeah, I just had that. I kind of had it was a rough end of the year, right? I mean, there's a lot of shit going on, and so I went through some of that and then said, hey, what am I looking forward to? And yeah, I guess in a nutshell, I'll throw a few things out there, but I just got done. So I've been listening a lot to Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy.
Oh yeah, I know Gary Vaynerchuk. Yep.
Oh, excellent. So I'm new to him and his philosophies, but I mean, the guy, fucking love it. Like first of all, I'm a, regular, what's the term for like someone who does it all the time? Dude, fucking filthy mouth, right? Like every third word's a cuss word. I mean, already we're going to be fast friends, right?
Okay.
I love his presentation. I just think he's very authentic and raw and puts it all out there. But yeah, I've been listening to him and getting a lot of inspiration from him. And I've, been taking a lot of his advice and saying, look, like I've done this podcast with you now. We're going to blow it up this year. We're going to do some new things, but I also want to be doing other things in social media and maybe talking about other things that I've avoided out of fear, or I'm too scared, or what are people going to think? I mean, a lot of it's around what people think, and that bothers me. So yeah, I actually started working on a new project. I haven't unveiled it officially yet, but I bought the domain and I've got a blog ready to publish, and it's called it's called Year 36 Project, year36project.com. And I'll send you a link. I'll say I have a video. So anyway, I was recording a video today and I had to do like 19, 20 takes because video is even a whole nother level of, we do this audio thing and you slice and dice and you take out all the shit that I say, but I was going to do this in one take. So it took a lot of takes. But I got into it and I recorded it and I finished it and I just watched it on my TV and I'm pretty happy with it. But it's really just a personal development blog for 2018. So what I want to do is I'm 36. And so the Year 36 project is like 1 year of me sharing my personal growth and development. What is going well, what I'm struggling with, like not just all good shit, upside shit, but also like, man, I'm having a hard time dealing with things like my dad passed away last November. And, I'm really worried about what people think and that kind of shit. And so it's kind of like a place where I can put all that, because I don't want to just dump all of it on my personal Facebook feed for family and friends, but I want to put it here and people that are interested can check it out.
Yeah, man, I like it. Kind of a warts and all blog. I think that's a good idea. I don't think there's a lot of people want to put out the good news, but really not the bad news. And I think there's a human element to that. And I think that's important.
That's absolutely right. I don't think that's the best way to describe it. Warts and all. That's what it is. So, I'm going to give it a shot. I don't really it's kind of like this thing, right? I didn't set out to make X amount of episodes or have X followers. I'm just really trying to make it a personal development piece, get comfortable with the video. I got the green screen out, and so I was doing some green screen, cool shit today. Ordered some more lighting, and we'll see what happens. Should be good.
Unless you don't want to, we'll put a link in the show notes rather, and people can check it out once it's available and running.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm all for it. I'm not holding back. It's something that scared and terrified me for a long time, and now that we've taken the first step of doing this podcast, it's helped me to deal with some of my fears. And so at this point, I'm going to blow the lid off of it.
I am curious, kind of along the same vein. You started off talking about Gary Vaynerchuk. So back when I knew him, he was building a wine website, and that was kind of his primary bread and butter. But I know he's very big into the podcasting or vodcasting world. What's he doing now? Is he more of a marketing guru, or what's his function at this point?
Yeah, that's fair. He's a marketing guru. He has a parent company, VaynerX, and there's a few subsidiaries. VaynerMedia is his big company on the East Coast. It's in New York City. And he has, as part of that, he has a couple. I like his perspective, and I actually have this for a topic for another time, so I'm not going to get all the way into it. But anyway, he's really good about knowing how to carve out your niche in different social media platforms. So how to really maximize your brand on all of them and how to treat each one a little differently. So that's kind of his niche. But yeah, his company works with the big Fortune 500 guys, and they do all kinds of social media strategy and marketing. But what I like about him is that he's also providing a lot of value personally. And so when you look at his YouTube channel, he's got a couple different shows that are pretty regular. The Gary V show, I think it's the Daily Gary V, there's a couple of them, and I'm going to mince the names, but basically one of the shows is a daily thing, and he's got his camera crew following him around to his meetings and appointments and whatever the fuck, eating Thai food in Manhattan. and he just puts together a video of kind of his highlight reel, and it's inspirational, and he's meeting with people that are trying, up and comers and that sort of thing. And it's just all free advice, right? He's not trying to, it's not at the end, click on my link to have us develop your social media. It's just hey, here's how I got to where I am, and here's kind of my brain, what I'm thinking about. And he puts it out there for people for free. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's cool. He's come a long way then since his little wine. I think he used to do wine reviews. I think that was kind of his first online video foray, was wine reviews. So.
He talks about that, and it's still there. He doesn't own it anymore. I think he sold it off. Maybe he has some ownership. I don't think he's an owner, though. I think he got rid of it and kind of left when it was on top. And now he likes being the underdog. He likes coming from behind. And so he kind of it was a combination of things. He had the success of that, and he invested some money in some stocks that it paid off. And then now he's going big on this whole marketing thing. And it's cool. I recommend it. It's at Gary V, VEE is his Twitter. And then I think it's YouTube and all that stuff. You can find it that way too, but it's good. It's really good shit. I've been amped up listening to him. Very inspiring.
Cool. I'm going to check it out for sure. Let's move on to some follow-up and show notes, shall we?
Let's giddy up.
So the first bit of show notes news here is that last week we went a little bit long with the personal stuff, partly because we were off for the month, but I think we both kind of felt that there was a lot of content in terms of personal items rather than technology items, which I don't think either of us really care necessarily, but we thought maybe just kind of keep it fairly tech related during the primary core of the show. And then we're going to add a post show after the theme song where maybe we'll talk about some of these other items. So stay tuned for that after the show, and anything that is non-tech related that we decide that we want to bullshit about, try and cue it up there instead.
Yeah. Anything else? So stay tuned after. That's the whole point of the story, is stay tuned. If you like our bullshit, then you can get a free batch of bullshit afterwards if you stay tuned.
A fresh batch of shit.
Who doesn't want a fresh batch? A steamy heap, if you will.
The only other piece of follow-up I had on there was last week's show. I was kind of reviewing it here before we recorded this evening, and I noticed a couple times, I think you even made reference to it at one point, that the what is it? 8th gen i7. We referred to it a number of times as the i8, which is not correct. There is no i8.
Right. i8 is not existent. It's the I is the generation of core, right? The different core processors, Intel processors.
I believe that's correct. Yeah. So at this point, it's the 8th generation i7, or as you referred to, I think in the show, KB Lake, I believe is what they're called.
I think it's the 8th. I think i7 is KB Lake, and I think 8th is KB Lake Refresh or something along that line.
Sounds like you're going to look it up.
Wow. This can't be fucking for real, dude. Talk about a strange twist of. Do you know what they call the 8th gen chips?
I do not.
Coffee Lake.
Is that right?
Get the fuck out. Yeah. It's 8th generation. Intel announced its latest 8th gen core processors and promising the new chips will offer 40% speed boost over the 7th gen KB Lake. But later, here we go. So, okay, so here, I wasn't totally wrong. Getting announced today is a refreshed version of the KB Lake architecture that makes up the 7th gen processors. But later releases in the 8th gen will offer the upcoming 14 nanometer Coffee Lake and the 10 nanometer Cannon Lake technologies too. So how about that? We were talking about coffee the whole time. We didn't even know about it.
Well, I think it sounds like you need to get yourself a Coffee Lake processor. I mean, it's really what I'm hearing.
That is exactly how I can pimp into Dell over there. I mean, if I coffee code cast and need a Coffee Lake, they're going to be the new Dell XPS 13s. I might as well get one or two to play with, don't you think?
Yeah, I think we need to make that happen.
All right. Well, I'm going to write those guys, man. We'll get on that right away. We're right on target, too. I mean, we're nailing it with the time today.
Oh, yeah?
We're about 16 minutes in.
Well, good. We got a shitload to talk about still.
We do have a lot to talk about. Yeah.
So we can, I guess, start with, I have a bunch of people in the industry that I guess I admire. You know, we talked about Gary Vaynerchuk earlier. Maybe that's a good example for you. I had a number of those prior to moving to Seattle, especially. You know, you had kind of the Silicon Valley and the West Coast kind of tech sector, whereas in the Midwest, you don't have a whole lot of that. So I had a whole lot of people that I looked up to. And as soon as I moved here, I got sent to South by Southwest conference. And at that conference, I met a number of those folks and was kind of disappointed, I guess, is the best way to describe it. You kind of build these people up in your mind as to being some kind of, I don't know, superhuman god coders, if they're coders or whatever they may be. You just kind of build them up in your mind to be something that maybe they can't live up to or they're not. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. So I've had this happen now twice to me since I've moved to Seattle. So that was one example, was a particular developer a number of developers that I followed who I met there, and come to find out that they were just pretty much average run-of-the-mill guys. They just kind of happened to be strong voices in the industry at the right time and kind of found a very niche, kind of like Gary Vaynerchuk again, they found a niche audience because they were a very strong voice and a strong advocate for a particular topic at the time that topic happened to blow up.
Why is it, do you think? Because I'm with you 100%. I'll tell you what, when I made the decision to come to Seattle, well, and I mean, you knew about that before anybody because we met together that summer before it was even really a thing. But my insecurities and my fears about coming out to the big boy tech culture, I mean, I was just so terrified about coming out. What is it about, do you think, for you, like building these people up that way? What is it? Why is that the default? Because I know you're not alone in this. I feel this way. I think a lot of people I've talked to feel this way too, is like when we are positioning ourselves in these settings and looking at sizing up the competition, it's very natural to prop them up to unrealistic levels that are superhuman. And for me, at least, put myself in a very small place, to go very low and just say, well, you know, I'm fucking stupid. I don't know anything that these guys know. What is that? What is that about, do you think, for you? I mean, I don't know. It's very interesting how that's the default instead of the other way around, or even a more moderate approach, which is like, hey, he probably knows some shit that I don't, and I probably know some shit that he or she doesn't, which is more realistic, right?
insecurity, I would say for me. I'm not, I'm not the type of person that's going to come out and come at anybody. I'm not the most, I wouldn't say I'm not confident. I just would say that I'm not, what's the word? Arrogant. I don't know. I don't know. I can't think of a better word than that right now, but I don't know. I guess maybe I'm humble. Humble might be the better word. I know there's people out there that are stronger than me at, any skill. I'm not of the belief that I'm better than anybody at anything. To this particular topic, when people kind of speak on items that I very blatantly know are incorrect.
Well, I think I know what you're saying, though. This is different than what I thought originally. And so correct me if I'm wrong here, but what you're saying is it's not so much that you walk in the door feeling less than necessarily. What happens is that you walk in the door and you watch a presentation, or you get to a one-on-one, or you have a conversation with these guys, and just their posture, the way they present themselves is like such a level of confidence that, you just assume like, wow, they clearly know their shit just by the way they carry themselves, or how comfortable they are in the subject matter, or how even like, if you didn't know any better, like they act with certainty about the things they're talking about. When in reality, when you find out 3 or 6 months down the road, maybe they didn't really know that shit. They're just acting the part.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And what comes to mind now to kind of explain that is a little bit of what we talked about last week on the show, was that they speak with authority. Whether or not they know what the hell they're talking about, they're speaking as if they do. Another good example I can throw out there is at my wife's company. I know she struggles with the fact that there's a number of people at that company that do speak with a heck of a lot of authority and hold a ton of weight, and are kind of maybe not the best people to be speaking, on the particular topic at the company, but because they're perceived as so weighty, the other people don't give any kind of feedback or don't try to rebut any of the points or anything like that. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting at, is just like this really authoritative voice that I think it's easier to project that from afar, in the example of, us being in Omaha and following people out here, because you have no way of knowing other than the voice that or I guess the face that they're projecting out onto the internet, right?
Yeah, that's it. I agree with that 100%. I think for me, it's both ways. I think that there's a piece of that where, yeah, like I'm going to inherently trust your authoritative nature and assume that you know what you're talking about. And that automatically puts me kind of on defense. Like, ooh, I don't really know. I got to be careful. I shouldn't just challenge this person. I do think, though, for me, it's a real piece of just even showing up before I even have the conversation. I'm already assuming that I'm less qualified or don't know as much, or like I think I have a little bit of that element too, which is pretty fucked up. I don't like that. I
think I do in interview situations. That comes very, very apparent to me as well. I feel very I guess outgunned might be a good word, because you don't know what's coming at you, so you already know they have an upper hand, and you don't know what their skill level are. So you could be talking to them, and they might just be thinking this guy's a complete dumbass. But you have no idea.
Nope. I don't know what the answer is for that. I can say, though, that just by practicing whatever it is, I think, I don't know, I'm kind of tripping over myself here, but I think the more of those interactions that we can create, because that's the other thing too, right? Like, how often does that happen? Like, interview situations, generally speaking, don't happen very often. So that's already an uncomfortable thing. Some people I know just go out and interview just for the fuck of it every couple of months or something, So it's like you get to do that enough times, and I think you probably level the playing field. You just get more comfortable, more confident. I think it's just a confidence game. Like, you do that enough times, you go to enough meetups, you go to enough things where you're talking to other people, and I don't know, maybe that's the solution. Over time, the playing field gets leveled, and you have more of a realistic sense of what's happening out there.
Well, and I feel that I've become more confident in that respect in my job. I don't feel like when I come into something that I used to have a whole lot of insecurity about everything that I would say. Pretty much, I felt like I was bullshitting my way through job interviews or talking to other people, whereas now I'm pretty confident in what I say, and I feel like I can talk with just about anybody about it and speak with pretty good knowledge. So it's not really as big of an issue for me anymore. It's just in this case where I hear other people that I look up to, or that in the second case, this guy is an iOS developer and has a pretty popular application that is used by quite a number of people. And you hear him talking about some of these things and you're just kind of shaking your head and wondering, how the hell did you get to this place?
Yeah. It is still a Wild West of sorts. It's calming down now, but that is something about tech, unlike other fields that are more, have more history, right? Like this is such a new and booming space, and not so new anymore, but it's still a place where you don't have to have a degree to get in a job. If you're really good, you can skip the degree. And I think that's part of it too, is that it's still kind of this wild thing. And sometimes, because we're not the most extroverted bunch, right? Like the people that are the loudest and the most outspoken are going to be heard. And I think that's part of it too, is that we need to be more comfortable with who we are.
Yeah. And I think that was the point that I brought up earlier, is that some of the people that I followed and that I met later on, they were loud voices that had a very confident voice at the right time in the right place. And so that's what got them there. And it just took me a while to find that out, or to understand that, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think really, as far as takeaways for this, we're all just people, even your Scott Guthrie and your, people that you may look up to, they're all just people.
Not Scott Guthrie. He's Uberman. I get nervous just saying his name. Oh my gosh. Ooh. Scott Goo. The old Scott Goo.
We're all flawed. Everybody has their flaws. Even though we're not confident, other people have the same types of insecurities or issues that they struggle with. Maybe it won't be their job and speaking their, what they're doing full time, but they have other insecurities that maybe you haven't exposed or you don't know about yet.
Well, it's certainly true. The more work experience that I've had, you go into the first job feeling a little inadequate or unsure and inexperienced, right? But then you realize pretty quickly, like, man, like these knuckleheads don't know what they're doing, or they kind of fumbled around. And in every job, you've got, it's not even that they're necessarily, maybe I'm being a little harsh here. Not everybody's a knucklehead, but it's just that you realize how human people are once you see each other every day and spend a few years together. And it's like, okay, if I can just realize up front that this is the way that most of the world works, then it doesn't have to be such a difficult thing for me.
The only other takeaway I had on that item is just, that oftentimes the people that seem to be in these positions, the Gary Vaynerchuk, as we mentioned earlier, he was a video podcaster. He was one of the very first ones. So he was an early adopter. He was in the right place at the right time, and he's a good voice, right? He's a very good talker. He's a very good marketing guru. So he was in the right place at the right time, and he made the most of it.
Well, and the making the most of it part that I've learned from him too is two things. There's two pieces to that, right? One is that oh my God, I just lost my fucking train of thought.
I almost did that earlier too.
Oh boy, bring it back. Reel it in, boys. Reel it in. The two things that he had going for him, the two things that he did. Was he learned how to be a great storyteller. And I think that's a big piece of this too, is like we all are storytellers. I mean, if we all want to have success at this thing, we all are marketers. We're all trying to market ourselves. We're all trying to make a pitch. Maybe it's not in front of a bunch of people on a social media channel. Maybe it's just the boss, or maybe it's just the supervisor or the lead or whatever. But in order to be successful and have our best shot at it, we have to learn how to become better storytellers. And I think it does help too. The second piece is not giving a fuck what other people think, which is easier said than done. But I think those two pieces right there, that's how you get yourself up there and you get those risks to take. And that wasn't something that he always had. He said that that was something that he had to figure out. But I think from a young age, he just didn't give a fuck what other people think. And that's a big part of it too. Like you get over that, then I think it's a lot easier to engage in a conversation with somebody. You're going to be less intimidated or less worried about saving face or getting it wrong or whatever. If, you're talking to somebody that you idolize or look up to, it's like, hey, I'm just having a conversation. It's two dudes having a chat. And so I don't know. I think there's a big piece of that. And then, I don't know, there was another piece of it too with the social media thing. Well,
and another item that I wanted to kind of mention, back in a past role, I I don't know how to even really explain, as I self regulated my own work. And what I mean by that is that I wouldn't take on big, scary challenges in terms of what the company had going on. So maybe a good way to describe this is, as soon as I came on to the current job, I began rewriting a lot of the payment provider, or was given access to a lot of the payment provider information, through auth.net.
Yeah.
Which at the previous company was a huge no-no for me. I wasn't allowed to touch that because that deal dealt with money and could potentially, lose the company a ton of money if I made a mistake, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So during my entire tenure there, I kind of felt as though I was pigeonholed to doing strictly front-end work that was deemed fairly safe. And I never really requested or pushed to try and do a whole lot more. So I kind of just regulated myself out of challenging work or risky work, as it might be perceived.
Yeah.
And so part of that, again, goes right into this whole same conversation, is that I wasn't confident enough to do it. And I didn't speak authoritatively on the subject, so they weren't confident in me. And so I never got the chance to do any of those things.
Yeah, it's self-defeating, isn't it? Because we're not confident and don't present ourselves that way, all of a sudden it kind of erodes like that trust, or the people are like, well, geez, you don't seem very certain about it and you're not saying a whole lot about it. So I think it's just kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways. And when we are confident and do put it out there, then all of a sudden those guys pick up on it and say, oh, geez, like we should give it to them, even if maybe that wasn't the right idea anyway, right?
That's one of the things I appreciate about the current company, is they're pretty willing to let you run until you make a mistake, right? I mean, even when you make a mistake, they still kind of let you run, but they're just like, whoa, buddy.
Yeah.
Easy there. They just kind of they give you pretty good freedom, which I appreciate. But kind of back to the point is that you kind of self-regulate yourself, and that's a good thing. You're not going to, chances are, unless you're a really good bullshitter, you're not going to run into something and be like, hey, I can make in this case, I will say, I can make the website run 30 times faster. Well, bullshit. Like prove you can't. The proof's in the doing, right? You can't bullshit your way for too long. Eventually, you're going to be exposed.
Yeah, it'll catch up with you. That's right. That's for sure.
All right. Well, shall we move on to the news?
What the fuck, dude? I just got a little. You didn't hear mine ding, but I did get a little alert. Expect rain in San Francisco tomorrow.
Oh shit.
Oh fuck, dude. Fuck. I've only expected rain here since October 2 times, so I don't know what to do. I'm a little worried about that.
Oh man. How are you going to walk the dogs? Shit.
Fuck. Never mind. Forgot I've lived in Seattle for 5 years and expected rain every day. Dude, there's some crazy shit going on in the news. Some of this isn't new news, but it's big news. And so I think we should just cut right to the chase. And I've been wanting to talk about this for a while now, is what's been going on around net neutrality. And more specifically, the legislation that was passed to remove the net neutrality laws that were in place, basically rolling back the net neutrality that was put in place originally. Well, it was first put in 96, and then, Obama revised that in 2015. So it's been in place for a few years, and then, repealed. What does it mean? Is the internet going to shit? What's going to happen? That's what I want to talk about.
Well, so if you're not familiar, which I think if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are, but net neutrality, what does it mean? It means basically equal priority for for all traffic, right? It's kind of the civil rights for the internet or something, right? Yeah,
sure. It's like, basically it's saying, look, as an internet service provider, you're not going to discriminate packets. When I request a packet for Netflix versus a packet for a Costco order or Amazon, that they're all treated equally, that they don't speed one up or slow one down. And so, the repeal of that has some implications. Maybe some of them are crazy, but some of them seem far more realistic, and it's kind of a scary thought of what could happen if it's allowed to stay. This is allowed to be upheld.
Right. So I think everybody has the alarmist attitude, and the first thing that you see online is these kind of images that show, oh, if you're on Comcast, they're going to slow down Netflix and they'll give you Hulu, but you'll lose Amazon Prime, or, you'll get faster speeds with this one, but not that one, or those types of things, kind of making it almost sound like the cable companies where you know, subscribe to this package and get these things, or subscribe to these packages and get these things. Well, I mean, that is certainly possible. They do have the control to do that, but I think it's not in their best interest to do that. And I think that's also a pretty alarmist attitude that we're kind of portraying out there. I don't really think that's going to happen. However, I do believe that throttling is going to occur. I did work back in the day. My first job was with a little rural ISP in Nebraska. And I do understand why the ISPs want this to be the way that it is. You know, you do have consumers who are very, very abusive against your services. You have a limited pipe. So, I mean, you could even think of it as a pipe, you know, that you have in your house. Like it has a maximum flow rate. You can't expand that flow rate at all, right? I mean, so there's a maximum amount of data that they can put through a pipe, and people abuse those things, and they need to be able to throttle them in some way if they're overusing. And that's their main argument that they're trying to put through. But of course, you know, people are thinking that they're going to use it for more nefarious and greedy purposes.
Yeah, it becomes a problem when you do have that user or group of users. I know back in the day when AT&T had grandfathered data plans, unlimited data, right, for life. Well, that wasn't exactly for life, but at the time it would look really cool. And so I was on one of those for a while. But then, you know, my buddy had gotten hit up a couple of times too for, you know, streaming. All the video streaming he was doing on his cellular network was just hogging the pipe. And so even him, like, he had gotten kicked off at one point. They just said, look, you know, like you're violating the terms of service. And I don't know how they had some legal jargon to protect it, even though it was unlimited. I mean, he was consuming so much of the pipe that, you know, they couldn't just have him doing that anymore because everybody else's speed was suffering. So we don't want that to happen. I mean, that is a real thing. I was just reading a story recently about, you know, with streaming services, you've got ESPN app on Apple TV and on PlayStation View, right? You got these different, if you have someone's Xfinity or Comcast account credentials, you can log into ESPN using those credentials and watch streams. And so they limit those. I think on ESPN, you can have maybe 5 or something like that, logins at a time, simultaneous. But before they started to tighten that up, I think HBO, somebody had like 30,000 streams from one account. Like, can you imagine like 30,000 shows running down the pipe at the same time? You know, I mean, that's just the kind of shit they're trying to protect, right?
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a proponent of what they're trying to get at or get through. You know, I'd rather the laws remain the way they were, but I was just trying to, I guess, state the case that the internet tends to be very alarmist. The people that speak very loudly are speaking usually the worst case scenarios. And in this case, I think that is a pretty worst case scenario that I don't think is going to occur. Well,
I do have some problems with it. I do have some concerns. You know, I don't like the idea. There was some language in this, you know, this legislation that said something to the effect of, and I'm paraphrasing here, but like, we're just going to kind of like, you know, in a good faith kind of effort, we're going to trust the ISPs to, quote, do the right thing, you know, and I don't like that either, because I think without any kind of regulation or restriction, it can get really slippery slope pretty quickly. And I was doing some research on this, and I don't know if you're familiar, but in a few places, like the big example right now is Portugal, for example, who has doesn't have any net neutrality. And so it's very common if you go to a ISP in Portugal and you try to sign up for service, you're not going to get kind of a, you know, like here in the States, it's like, oh, you pay X for 5 gigs, you pay X amount for 10 gigs or 15 gigs of bandwidth. You can pick how big of a pipe you want, how much of the pipe you want going to you. And okay, that's fine. I can pay more for more bandwidth. That seems fair. But there, it's a whole different deal. So you're actually bundling apps. And so it's things like if you want to have Pandora or streaming music, then you pay $5 a month. And if you want to have email access to these 5 email providers, that's $5 a month. And so there it's very much a package, you know, putting these packages together. And maybe if you need 5 different packages just to do what you normally do on the net, and each of those packages comes with its own bandwidth restrictions. Well, you get 5 gig of email, or you get 15 gig of streaming video. And if you run out, then you got to pay more, right? So I think that's what I'm hoping doesn't happen, but that I'm worried that kind of thing could possibly happen. Another kind of counterpoint to that, it's similar, but it's a little different. It's a term that it was new to me when I was researching this, but zero rating. You're familiar with zero rating, but this is basically the idea where now, let's say that Netflix strikes up a deal with Comcast and says, hey, look, I think T-Mobile did this already. That T-Mobile had that binge on package.
That's right. Yep.
If you're on T-Mobile and you want to watch Netflix, you can do so, and it's not going to count against your data plan. So what if I'm Coffee Codecast Flix and I want to start up my own streaming movie service? In this case, I'm not going to get any exposure. I mean, there's already it's unfair competition, right? Because now, like, if you're on T-Mobile, there's no fucking way you're going to pay data to watch the show on my service, even though maybe it's faster or higher quality. It's going to be a tough decision because you're going to want to use the free one. It's like, well, I only have a limited data plan, and if I can get Netflix for free, it's good enough. Even though maybe it's not as good as your service, I'm not going to pay for it. So that kind of unfair competition or unfair advantage, I think, is already happening, and that makes me a little uncomfortable too. I don't want to see that, and so I'd like to see that be tightened up a little bit more. I'd like to see more regulation on stuff like that.
Well, and the other big scary argument is that Comcast is one of the big players here, right? And they own a whole bunch of smaller companies under their umbrella. So in theory, they could prioritize traffic to their own properties, whereas they might limit to everything else, that sort of thing. So they'd become kind of a monopolizing figure a little bit. So that's another big scary point that people like to tout, which certainly could happen. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that sort of behavior go on. So I agree. I think it's a scary thing. And I think they need to roll back the legislation that they've now changed again.
Yeah.
And hopefully maybe in a couple of years that can happen.
Yeah, I think there's still some sites out there. I don't know this for a fact, but I know that John Oliver was a big voice in this whole debate 3 years ago or 2 years ago when they were trying to repeal the first time. And he was back out again earlier last year with, I know there was a site like gofccyourself.com.
Okay.
His site that led straight to the FCC kind of like complaint page where you could go and fill that out. And I know there are people doing petitions. I don't know though, like I don't have those resources right now. So maybe I could find those. We could add them later, but I would say, yeah, let it be known, call the representatives, fill the protest, do what we can to try to reverse that and have something that's a little more fair. I mean, I do understand too that in principle, like this was attached to, net neutrality was originally attached to legislation from 1934 that dealt with telephony. So it's, that's probably not the right answer either, but we need something in between, and we're not there yet.
Yeah, it needs to be treated as a public utility. Everybody needs it. Everybody needs fair access to it. It just needs to be a widely distributed thing, just like electricity is, or gas is, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, imagine somebody gave the example too, is like if your utility of water, like water works the same way. Pipes a certain size, and you can only have so much at a time, so much flow. But imagine now that you have to pay, a certain rate for watering the lawn and a more expensive rate for taking a shower, and like an even higher rate to fill a pool. And all of a sudden now, like you're consuming the same quantities of water, but you're paying different rates depending on the usage. And that's the sort of kind of consequence that we'd be up against here is paying different rates for different things based on what an ISP sets to throttle or whatever.
Well, you live in California now. You should be used to getting rear-ended by water usage.
Well, we just don't have any here, man. So, we got plenty of fire. That's a commodity that everybody can get their hands on. Water's a different story. So yeah, it's pretty bad. And marijuana now after January 1st.
Hey, I heard about that.
Legal. Legit.
Congratulations.
Yeah, man. I was going to get in line, but apparently the places downtown aren't open yet. So I don't know if that's the 6th or something, I think. But yeah, I'm still dealing with my remnant stash from Seattle. I got to make it last a little longer, a few more days. Fucking A, man. Why are we talking about these guys again? Every time we have an episode, I feel like we're talking about these guys, and it's not always in a pretty light, Kyle.
You're going to do the Apple story.
Fucking Apple. Again in the news with this battery bullshit. The conspiracy theories, they're true. They're sort of true.
Yeah, there's a half truth there.
There's a half truth there. Why don't you tell me more about it, Kyle?
Well, a Redditor happened to do a number of tests against his iPhone devices. Primarily, I believe it affects the iPhone 6s and maybe into the lower 7 models, where that Apple was intentionally slowing down the OS for older devices with weaker batteries, is what the story amounts to.
Sons of bitches.
For good reason, though. The reason that they're doing this was that as they release new OS versions that are more power hungry on the particular phone models, and now you have an older phone with a slower processor and so forth. As it does these higher battery usage operations, the iPhone 6s had the possibility of just flat out shutting down. Like the battery could no longer handle that kind of load at one time. And so the phone would just like black out and turn off, in which case you'd have to restart. So what they were trying to do is to prevent that behavior. However, they got in a lot of trouble because they didn't notify the user that that's what was happening or that they were doing this at all. So it's a bit of a trust issue.
Yeah, and it really begs the question, too, like, what's going on with these fucking batteries, right? Because, Samsung, LG, Motorola, these guys all came out saying, look, we don't fuck with the battery life. We don't do anything to throttle the performance of the phone. All batteries, all lithium-ion batteries have the same degradation issues, right? Like over time, after many charges, they're gonna suffer. Their performance is gonna go down. They're not gonna hold as much as they used to. The voltages are gonna go down. I'm not an electrical engineer, but these are just things that I've seen as like, the performance of the batteries over time, they get worse, not better. But why Apple is choosing to throttle these things, and not even that, I guess I understand why they're doing it, but my question is, why are they the only ones having problems with shutdowns? I don't know how many Samsung, LG, Motorola phones just shut off after 2 years. I haven't heard lots of reports of that. Maybe we'll hear more about that as this story develops. But it seems very curious to me anyway why this is what seems to be like a unique problem to Apple and not some of the other manufacturers. Are they just making shitty batteries? Do they cut some corners? Is it, are there some flaws that need to be corrected? I don't know. But it's very interesting to say the least.
Well, and I do feel like it's a little bit of a cop-out because I feel like rather than just limiting battery performance, why wouldn't you just, cap peak usage, for instance, right? Like if it's drawing a very high usage, like you should be able to, on a scale, understand the usage of the device instead of like just globally saying this device now runs at 60%. Like you should be able to scale that down at the highest end, right?
Seems like a blunt instrument just to say, well, your CPU is going to be throttled to 50% now.
Right, exactly.
Yep, well, that's true too. I mean, it sure makes me want to go out and buy a new one every time my fucking phone's running at 50%.
Well, you need to get the $1,000 iPhone 10, of course.
Ooh, that's a pretty phone. It's a sexy beast. The battery's going to suck after a couple of years, though, but as long as you can deal with that, then I'd say throw $1,000 over their way.
Well, the good news is that the good people at Apple have now put a program in place where you can get your battery replaced for the low cost of $29.
$50 off, by the way. It used to be $79 for battery replacement. And they lifted the restrictions on it, too. I think you had to have a certain, you had to pass a certain test. The battery had to be beyond a certain lifespan before they would do that for you anyway.
Yeah, you would go in, and if you've ever been to an Apple store and had a problem, they plug a device into your Lightning port and they run a whole slew of diagnostics and get a report out. So before it was that you had to have a failed diagnostic from that device in order for them to replace the battery, and now they've lifted that restriction.
Sweet. So in theory, you can go bring your other, previous 4 generations of iPhone back and for $30 a pop, get a new battery.
And they'll run as fast as the iPhone 10.
That's pretty damn cool, man. I like that. I mean, I used to keep a few of those laying around for my backup, Apple TV remote kind of a thing, or put on some music in the background. So maybe I'll have to go digging through and see if I can find some old ones laying around. So
yeah, that's the Apple story. I mean, I don't know really, it made a lot of headlines and a lot of people are upset about it. But, on the one hand, I understand why the Apple did what they did. they just did a very, very poor job of communicating why they were doing it and, that it was happening, period. So I think if they would have made people aware of that, I think it probably wouldn't have been a story at all. But unfortunately, it is what it is.
Lots of lawsuits, there's going to be a lot of litigation going on for a while. So it'd be fun to see. We'll keep you all posted on what's going on as we get the developments, but we'll be interested to see what comes out of this whole thing.
All right, Chipper. Well, what's coming up next on the show?
That ties into our next week's teasers. We've got the Consumer Electronics Show coverage up in Vegas next week. CES can be going on from the 7th to the 13th or so. It's that week. And always lots of coverage there, lots of new unveilings. I already know some of the teasers coming out of there are going to be in the Ultra books, as we talked about last time. Some new developments there. There's some new television technology, OLED displays and that sort of thing. I think LG has an 88-inch OLED 8K or something ridiculous, and it's going to show. Yeah, it's just nuts. I mean, they always bring out the craziest shit for these things. So it'll be a lot of fun. We'll talk about some of the new products that get unveiled. I got a couple other things out there. I as I mentioned earlier on my little personal project, I needed a site. And so I did a static site generator. Hugo. I don't know if you're familiar with Hugo. It's a Golang language, static site generator. Pretty cool. I got it set up with Visual Studio Code, and I'm actually running it on the Google Cloud. I was having trouble. It has Azure integration, so I thought, oh, this is cool. I'll get it up on Azure. And, I don't want to talk too much shit about my friends at Microsoft, but I couldn't get it to run on Azure the way it was supposed to. It was a container. And so I said, fuck it. I'm going to put the container on Google. So I'll talk about that next time. Oh, before you do it, though, I'm waiting for those people to act, but I basically submitted the request for coffeecodecast.com on Libsyn.
I did see that. I saw the email. So hopefully maybe even by the time this is published, www.coffeecodecast.com will be live for your viewing pleasure.
Love it. I love it. Bring us home.
Well, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just axe that part off. Do we need it? Do we need to repeat ourselves?
I don't think. We always say that shit. Nobody cares.
There you go.
If you want to contact us, figure out how to contact us. There you go, bitches.
If you are out there listening, though, let us know. Reach out to us, contact us, bitch at us. We don't care.
Yeah, I'd like something. I'd like to hear something from somebody.
Yeah. Tweet at us. Email us. Hit us up on the website, Facebook, whatever. We're everywhere.
Oh, I want to shout out to another one of our fans. I heard from David this week. You saw David's comments on Facebook?
I did see David's comments, yeah.
How fucking cool is that? David was a coworker and a good friend and a developer up here in Seattle. And, it'd be fun to share his story at some point or have him share it. Maybe he can come on and share it for us. But anyway, he's now fast forward a year down in Austin, Texas, and shared with us that his Saturday morning Wheaties breakfast is enjoyed with a little Coffee Codecast episode.
Yeah, he has coffee with the Coffee Codecast.
Yeah, what a great! I really appreciated that. It was nice to hear that, hear from those guys down there, and glad to know that we're on the Saturday morning ritual.
Yeah, it would be good to have them on. We should arrange for an on-air guest here. We haven't done that yet, and we've got a lot of people that we've talked to about it.
Yeah, I've got a short list, man. I know that I want to get the Tarifkin on just because I want to get closer to Scott Goo, man. That's kind of one of my New Year's resolutions. It's not.
There you go.
I mean, I'd like to hear from Aaron, but I'm really trying to get to Scott Goo. So no offense, but it's just it's kind of a means to an end kind of a thing for me. So we'll see if we can work that in.
Okay, well, post show. What do you got?
Onward and upward to my favorite part of the show, the post show. What do I want to talk about in the post show? Well, I do want to talk about this really quick. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. So if I don't know, do you want to go first, or do you want me to just like get this one out of the way? I don't think it'll take me very long.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just beginning the new year. It wasn't really a New Year's resolution. We kind of had already talked about it, but I started running these last couple days. So the last 2 days here, both nights I've gone out and I've run pretty slowly, but I've gotten it done, and I've run 40 minutes or so, and I've gotten, I don't know, 3.5 miles in, something like that. Pretty slow, but I'm doing it, and that's the important thing. Anyway, so I'm listening to podcasts on the run, and Jillian Michaels' show is usually what I'll end up listening to. I've listened to her for quite a number of years. She has her own podcast, and she was talking about fasting on this most recent one, which I thought was interesting because I think way back in show, was it number 1? We talked about that?
We did. It's been a little while. Yeah. Is an earlier one. Yep.
Right. So it was interesting to hear from her because she's traditionally been fairly against it because she's very, very worried basically about like your metabolism slowing down and you not burning the calories that you need to burn if that's your goal. But in this particular episode, she talked to I think his name was Dr. Axe, A-X-E. And she was talking to him about it, and he basically was telling her that it's not a problem. It's actually a pretty good thing to not necessarily lose weight. He said it wasn't really necessarily a great weight loss vehicle. He was saying it was more a bodily repair vehicle. Like it gives your body a good opportunity to repair itself and to regenerate itself and those sorts of things. He said that, weight loss may be somewhat of a byproduct, but he's like, that's really not probably what it's going to be for. He also recommended that maybe at max you do it 30 to maximum 90 days. Because then they started kind of getting into the whole ketosis conversation, which is, I think, kind of a side product of fasting. And basically, he was saying that the ketosis state, when your liver is creating ketones, effectively it's very hard on your liver to do that at a really, on a consistent basis over a long period of time. So he was recommending after 90 days to cut it out and then to kind of go to a more balanced, normal approach to a diet, just because it's stressful to your liver.
That's very interesting. I have to look into that a little bit more. I know just from what you were saying, though, about the cell death and regeneration, there was a lot that I had read about in fasting that, like autophagy, I think is the scientific term, happens when you have more of a prolonged fast for more than, say, overnight, if like from dinner to breakfast. If you can go a little longer, then the longer you're there, at some point that autophagy process kicks in and your body basically will kill off those bad cells that are damaged from toxins and that sort of thing. And it's a cleansing process. So I've heard that.
Yep. She mentioned a lot about anti-aging, that it's, basically she was indicating that your body doing digestion effectively ages you. So if you're in fasting mode, your body's not focused on digestion. It can focus on essentially cell repair or, self-healing. And that's kind of what she gets out of it, I guess, which was interesting for me to hear because she was traditionally, I wouldn't say totally against it, but she was very skeptical.
I don't know. I got to take a look at that a little bit more. That's interesting.
So what do you got on the post show here?
So this is a little different, but I was just chilling over the holiday weekend and looking for something just to entertain me, really. And I really like ESPN. I don't know if you watch many of these, but they've done a really good job with their 30 on 30. So
yes, I love 30 for 30.
Oh, they're so good. Oh, 30 for 30. Thank you. Yeah. Like I even called it wrong, but basically, like they do a great job. And I was hooked this past summer. I mean, I watched that 5-part OJ series, which I would highly recommend. Whether or not were, I mean, in the 90s, we were all glued to the TV watching the whole trial and all that shit. And the Bronco being chased down the 405. Who doesn't remember that? But anyway, more so than about the OJ coverage, it was really a historical, you got a lot of the history of race relations in the 60s and 70s in LA and and kind of the whole, they do a great job of setting a context around the whole thing. And so I loved that 5-part series. Anyway, can't recommend that enough. Check it out if you have, I mean, you got to have some time. Seems like 6 hours, 8 hours, something like that.
Yep. I think the whole idea between those, or about those films, is I think it's 30 different directors or producers. I can't remember which, and I don't remember what the other 30 is, but the 30 for 30 has significance. But yeah, I've been watching those for a while, probably, I don't know, a year maybe at this point. And one of the more recent ones was a 30 for 30 on Ric Flair's life. So if you're familiar with wrestling from back in the day, when I was a kid, I was a big wrestling fan, and
I didn't know that.
I thought Ric Flair was pretty cool shit. And, I didn't necessarily like emulate him or want to be him or whatever. But anyway, I knew of him, and he was very prominent, obviously, in wrestling. And they did a really, really interesting piece on Ric Flair's career and all his women that he, hung around with. And, kind of the same as your video too. Like they kind of warts and all, they tell about his drinking and his drugs and, all the ladies that he was with and his, failed marriages and all that sort of thing. So it's really interesting and kind of heartfelt because, at the end of the show, he's kind of a broken down dude who, he can't wrestle anymore, which was his only love. He doesn't have anybody left really in his life because he's kind of alienated everybody. So I don't know. They're all very powerful. They're very well done. Yeah, I would definitely, to your point, recommend 30 for 30 if you're not watching them.
Yeah, I've watched a handful now, and I haven't watched that one, so I definitely want to check out the Ric Flair. But I have to say, in all of the cases that I've watched these, then maybe they're talking about a basketball, maybe they're profiling like Jordan, or whatever sport or whatever athlete it is, even though maybe I'm not a really big baseball guy. Like they've all been very educational, very entertaining, and hard to put down. And I guess the one I was going to tell you about, the one I saw over the weekend. So I watched one on Mike and the Mad Dog, which I really only turned it on because my name's Mike and my nickname used to be the Mad Dog when I was back in high school.
Oh, so now you're the Chipper.
Now I'm the Chipper. I've retired the Mad Dog. I hung him up, and I'm the well, he's still around in certain circles, but yeah, definitely the Chipper now. But no, this was great, and I had not heard of these guys. It shows how out of tune I am in the sports arena. But Mike Francesca and Chris Russo, and that whole story about these guys who were just a fucking dynamic duo in sports broadcasting in New York in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and I think they've been off now for, I think it's sometime in 2000s, like 2002 or 8. I can't remember when they went off the air, but just a powerful duo in the whole story. It was very interesting. It reminded me of my aspirations, Kyle, with the Code and Coffee and Codecast. Like these guys were just kind of doing like their own thing and doing their own shit and not really a whole lot going on. And then all of a sudden they were forced to be together. They didn't even really want to work together. They both had their own gigs going on in sports broadcasting. And once they figured out kind of their flow and their rhythm and how to work together, people just fucking loved it. The chemistry between them and just like the banter back and forth. And, it was gritty and it was fucking New York sports. And I mean, it went from like 10th in the charts one year to first place in sports radio, which is just crazy because that's already a competitive space. But, yeah, anyway, it got me dreaming a little bit about the Coffee Codecast, and I thought, well, maybe one of these days, we'll be a dynamic duo on AM radio or FM radio or internet radio. Maybe on Sirius XM, we'll get our own channel, Coffee Codecast.
You talked about the daily Coffee Codecast. You wanted to do that for a while.
I mean, that would be just fucking unreal, I think. Like a daily Sirius XM radio show for tech. We're just doing tech. People call in all day, every day. I don't know. These guys were doing it. Their show was 4 hours long, 5 hours long every fucking day.
Wow.
And, it was interesting. I mean, the progression, when they started doing it, they were looking at the newspapers for inspiration. By the time that they really were at their peak, they were uncovering stories. They were making trades happen, bringing people in, like Mike Piazza they brought in just by getting their fan base to rally to bring him in, So it was just kind of cool, the influence that they had. And it's unfortunate how it ended, how they fell apart. But really cool story. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be on Sirius XM doing some tech talk.
A couple of other 30 for 30s that I was looking through the episode list here, and a couple other ones that I would highly recommend. One of them was called Chasing Tyson. That one was basically following, I want to say, Holyfield and Tyson. So talking about all of the time that was spent trying to arrange the fight between those two. It was really, really interesting. Another one that I thought was really good because I was always intrigued by the dude just because he was kind of a weird guy in the sport was one about John Daly. It's called Hit It Hard.
Oh, I've heard about that. John Daly, the golfer, the crazy alcoholic. I mean, he was a fucking character.
Yeah, he was quite the guy, and he had a mullet, and he was just kind of a weird dude for the sport. You know, he wasn't the typical buttoned up, country club going guy. You know, he was very rough around the edges.
Yeah.
So talks about his life, which is really interesting, and he's had a really rough life and a really hard life. So pretty interesting there.
Wow.
And the other one that I thought was pretty cool was another one that was called This Was the XFL, which was pretty interesting to watch because I had already forgotten about the XFL league.
No, I don't really know a whole lot about that. That was supposed to be some other kind of like a minor league to the NFL or something, or what the hell was that? I don't even know.
They were pimping it to be another NFL competitor. It was actually Vince McMahon, which is the owner of WWE, and he was going to create, a more exciting, more electric football league, where I think they had stuff like the kickoff return or punt returns had no fair catch, for instance. You couldn't. So you had to take a hit or get killed, just get killed, or, and then they had, I think instead of a coin toss, they had like a scrum at the beginning. So they would like roll the ball and your two fastest guys would have to like run after it and dive, and whoever got the ball won, type of thing, stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting.
God damn, dude. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I could spend a whole week. Too bad I don't have a holiday coming up. I kind of blew it. I didn't do a whole lot of TV watching over Christmas and New Year, but now I wish I had more time to watch some of these 30 for 30s.
They're good shows. I recommend them. Yeah.
That's all I had. I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap this one up?
I don't think so. I think that's all the bullshit that I have to talk about.
There's only so much bullshit one can talk about in a day,